long, extensive lesson with me about the gifts because of everything that I did until the day that I died. It was completely backwards, messed up way of thinking about life and your uniqueness and how your uniqueness is actually your value and your value is your contribution here on your earthly journey. So it's so important, like our fingerprint, our blueprints are so unique, specifically to unlock our gifts, to help us on our mission. So here I was giving an example, going through life, doing everything I could to change myself, which then I wasn't accessing to the magnitude that God had designed me to receive these gifts and use them on my journey. And so things started making these things, doing a mission. So here I was giving an example, going through life, doing everything I could to change myself, which then I wasn't accessing to the magnitude that God had designed me to receive these gifts and use them on my journey. And so things started making so much more sense. And for time purposes, I won't go into all of it, but just know that that's the takeaway from this is that it wasn't just about me. It was about learning that if you're here and you're on this planet breathing, you are important and your uniqueness is definitely your value. It is going to help you unlock your potential and your gifts and use them with that love connection for God. And it's not just about you then. It's also about you learning how to embrace and empower other people on the planet, helping them have a space to see and grow their gifts if they don't, or if they do see it, then working together with your gifts to go on and do great things. Because can you imagine that rock and the impact that it made, that ripple? And if one person has their light on and they make that ripple, now can you imagine 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on of us choosing to have our lights on together? It just gives me goosebumps every time to understand the magnitude of the power in that, the power to change things for the better in that. And so, yeah, that was huge. There was so much that I learned through that. And I thought, when I was done, oh my gosh, this is absolutely incredible. And then I thought how lucky I was and blessed that God was taking this. I thought he's got to be busy taking this time because learning was always hard for me. I had dyslexia and some learning challenges when I was in the human form. And so it was pretty amazing how God was taking the time through each of these lessons to make sure that I understood what his point was with me, and that I grasped it so that it became a part of my DNA, my being, so that I would always keep it with me. It was important. And so anyway, we get done with that lesson and I'm thinking, okay, I mean, I don't know if I can learn anything else. Like this is incredible, you know. And it's so helpful. If I did have to go back to the planet again, I said to myself, my gosh, how many people would this help, including myself? I would do it right this time. I have the strength and the energy and the power through God's love, connection, to be able to do these things and to help people see it too. And then I just remember this feeling of, okay, actually, I want to go into heaven. And I sense that it's like this way to the right. And at that moment, God, this is the first time through all my lessons that God told me to look to my left. So I remember having to look to my left, and I'm looking down and out. And at this point, what I see was planet Earth. And even though planet Earth seemed very far away, it was close enough that I could really get a good sense of, the ocean and the continents, the water, the terrain, if you will, of the Earth. And just for the first time, being able to take that in was so incredibly profound. And I just remember thinking, my God, we are so lucky as humans to have that planet. Just really admiring how perfect it really was. That God had made for us. And having these feelings transpired into, oh, you know what? And my family's down there. And I had 2 little kids at the time, 3 and 6 years old. And I just remember thinking about them and thinking, now, here's the thing. I gave up my career when I had kids because to me, I'd always wanted to be a mom. And if financially it allowed us to, I really wanted to stay home with them. That was just something I'd always, wanted to do. And so I was lucky enough to be in that position. And I was loving it. I absolutely loved being a mom. And so you think, God, if you really were that kind of person, and what kind of person, doesn't want to go back to their kids? What kind of a mom is that, right? And so, but that goes to show you that when you know that you are finally home, you don't think like that. Because I could see that clearly there was a bridge between where I was in heaven and earth, where my kids, my family, was, everybody I cared about. And I saw for the first time, my God, it's true, we're not separated. We're always together. Because once we are able to see that these bodies are a vehicle, and there's so much more to each and every one of us, that connection is so strong that we can be together. And so I just had so much peace in knowing that, yes, they're down there physically, but we really aren't separated. And I wanted to stay there. I wanted to stay there because I knew I was home, and eventually one day they would come home too. And I'm, feeling good about everything and feeling like this must be my goodbyes before I go into heaven. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at the planet and I start getting concerned because I'm seeing something that looks like lights flickering all over the planet. And I just remember, okay, zone in to what you're seeing. So I remember trying harder and fixated more on these little flickering things. And as I'm looking more intently, I see that it's actually flames. And the flames are all over the planet. And as soon as I have that realization that, oh my gosh, these are flames all over the planet, it becomes engulfed and the flames are huge. And there's not one area that's, without flames at this time. So then I start having another panic attack. I'm just completely panicking. I'm terrified out of my mind. And God's like, here's your glasses. And I'm like, I'm not putting those on. It was God's glasses again. I wanted to resist it so bad because I was absolutely terrified knowing that my family was down there and people that were important to me. And I knew when I had the glasses on before that I was able to see what I couldn't see before, right? And so I was terrified. I didn't want to see it because what could be good out of flames, But it didn't matter. As soon as I saw the glasses, it was the same thing. I felt my arms, going forward, and I grabbed the glasses and I pulled them and I drew them onto my face. And of course, again, as soon as I got to my face, I could see perfectly. And I remember having to look. And this time, what I could see is in between all of the flames, there was souls, and they were lifting off unscathed from the flames. And their color, again, there's not a word for the colors here on the earth, but the best way I try to describe it is mercury, the metal mercury, when it's like viscous or whatever, you watch how mercury is. And so it was like that, but more transparent, translucent, and it had golden, silvery, white light through it. So it was like a life force. And I watched how all these souls were lifting off the earth, and they were unscathed, and they were coming closer, and they were flying past the left of my face and going in behind me, which I wasn't allowed at this point to turn around and see it yet, but I knew that it was heaven. So they were unscathed, and they were happy, and they were all going in just by the droves, thousands of them. And I just had this sense of overwhelming relief. I was like, oh my gosh, God, thank you so much. This is great. They're all coming in and we're watching them together. And I'm thinking, okay, we're fine. Everybody's fine. They've escaped the flames. And this was the first and only time in this experience that I felt this tremendous, overwhelming sadness from God. And the best way I can describe it as a mother is I cannot imagine. I feel for people who have lost their children. To me, that would be the worst thing to do to me while I'm in human form. And this feeling of sadness from God, take that times millions. And so it was the feeling that he had lost that many children. And I'm like, oh, no, God, look, I have your glasses on. I can see they're all okay. Everybody's coming up there in heaven. Everything is fine. Don't worry, as if I know, right? But that's how I was. I was like consoling God. And God stopped me and said, Erica, hand in hand with the gift of life, I give free will. And I didn't really know what that ever meant until I had this near-death experience. I had learned about it in church and all that, but not like this. And what I understood was God loves not just a fraction of his children, but each and every one of his children that he's created so much that he gave the selfless gift, love. Love is the choice, free will, that we have to choose if we want to love him back. So he doesn't force anybody to love him. You're going to love me, or you're going to get, zapped by a lightning bolt. It's not like that. We can choose at any time to have that love connection that God has for us. And so it was amazing that, God's letting us have this gift of controlling, do we want to have this, connection or not? It was just like the most selfless thing. And he was so, instead of celebrating for, yes, my children are coming in, right? He still wasn't going to give up, and his heart hurt, and he cried for those that chose not to have that love connection. Because you see, when I'm looking again now, past all the souls that are coming in, and I'm looking at the plane, I'm thinking, where are these souls that, he's crying about? And I'm looking, and I can see there are souls that are not lifting off. They're not lifting off the planet. They're staying on the planet. They're left behind. And I came to understand that love connection, that life force, like in the rippling effect lesson, right? Those souls that were coming in had chose to have that love connection. Their light was on, and it was the force needed to perpetuate them, lift them off the planet, and to come in to be with their family again, to be home. But those that were left behind chose to have that love connection off. So, it's like, I guess like a rocket, without that fuel they need, the rocket is not going to launch off. So think of the love connection maybe as a fuel in that way, if you will. And so, yeah, it was completely, oh my God. I mean, just absolutely profound. And, at this point then, I think, okay, I must be done, because I don't think I can handle learning, anything else. I'm just like completely filled up with knowledge. And I remember turning around so that I could go and join everybody that's just gone into heaven. And this is the first time that I saw heaven, and heaven was a planet. And for me, I struggled with that for years after this experience, because I didn't ever find anything in all the teachings, in the Bible and all the lessons I had for years that heaven was a planet. And so for whatever reason, the human side of me, I was apprehensive, I guess, at first about telling people about that, because, again, I didn't know how people would react. But at the same time, I was reminded of, I was just in heaven, and I learned that, it's not about me, and I can't worry about what others think or what I'm going to, hold back because I'm afraid of how people perceive me. That's the old Erica. And as long as I'm walking with God in that light and that love connection, I can't do that anymore. I just have to not worry about it and, report the things the way that they happen and then let go and let God. It's not my job, to convince people. So anyway, it was the most incredible looking planet. It was like a golden color. And again, doesn't even give it magnitude. I don't know what the color really is, but the closest thing I can tell you is like a goldenish life force. And I just remember starting to run fast into the planet and just being frozen in time, like not being able to move all of a sudden. And God said, "Oh, no, child, you're not going in there. Your mission's just begun. You've worked for me now. Remember?" He said, I want to give you, before you go back, 2 more things. He said, "I told you that I gave you, patience and beauty when you were born, and now I want to give you knowledge and wisdom. And when I send you back, I want you to be quiet and listen to the people that I put into your life. And then when you speak, you will take patience, beauty, knowledge, and wisdom, and you will change millions of people's lives." And before I could argue, like, "Please don't send me back. I know I'm home. I'll do anything." Before I could even get that out of my mouth, I feel like I'm stuffed through now another tunnel, and I'm going back to Earth because God just told me my mission isn't done, and I work for Him. So this time, going back down was a completely different experience in every aspect than the one going up. This was horrible. This experience was completely dark. There was absolutely no light present in this tunnel. And it was extremely confining, meaning I knew I was standing up and I knew that my arms were like stuck to the sides of my body. There was no room to expand. Like I had felt, limitless and so expanded. Going up wasn't like that at all. Going down, I felt completely alone. And not only could I not see anything because there wasn't any light, but I started to realize, oh my gosh, like I don't hear anything. I can't smell anything. So again, I'm starting to try to draw from my human senses, and there's like nothing. And then pretty soon, it feels like I'm traveling for such a long time. I start to get really, really slow in the tunnel. And remember, going up, it was like, supersonic speed. And it was completely the opposite. Going back down was like so painstakingly long. It was like almost like if you had a defected tunnel. It was like so slow. I didn't know if I was going to get down there. And at one point, I remember stopping in the tunnel. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like, I don't know what to do. God just gave me this job, and I'm going to listen after everything I've learned. I'm going to do my best, but I need to get down there and get it done because I want to go home. I don't even want to be on the planet. I am trying to think, how can I get myself going again? And this was the first and only time going back down that I didn't feel God's presence. I didn't feel that love connection. And it was terrifying. And I just remember panicking and feeling like, okay, I can't see, I can't move. And then all of a sudden, before I had another thought, I hear something in my left ear again. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, okay, well, I don't know what it is. I can't make it out, but it's the only thing that I've got to go on is my hearing right now. So I'm gonna really try to listen so I can get myself help to get down. And so the more I started listening intently to it, it first started sounding like, the best way I can describe it is when I was young, you're probably too young for this, but when I was young and it was like, I think like midnight or something, they would always have like the American flag on the TV. And then right before everything would go off, it'd be like this buzzing noise on the TV. So then it would let people know there was no more programs for the night or whatever. And so it was like that complete buzzing noise. And I'm thinking, that's weird, the buzzing noise. And it started getting louder. And as I'm listening to it more, I feel all of a sudden that first with my ear, I'm getting pulled out of this tunnel by this noise. It's completely directing me and pulling me out. As soon as I'm out of the tunnel, I'm placed on my back and my hands are still confined to my side. And I begin to travel that way. And I don't know where I'm going because it's completely black. I don't see stars or anything. It's completely black. But I just know, okay, it's the only thing I have to go off of. So I'm going to do my best to try to pay attention so I have a sense of where am I and how do I get back down. And so eventually I come to a stop and I'm just like hovering in blackness. And all of a sudden I hear this buzzing noise go from that to what sounds like a bunch of garbled, muffled voices. Like if hundreds of people were in a ballroom and, the acoustics are so bad because everybody's trying to have a conversation at once that you can't even understand yourself, and the people trying to talk to you directly because it's just so loud and muffled. That's what it sounded like. I couldn't understand anything. But I had this knowing all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think those are people's voices. I can't understand them, but I think that's what it is. As soon as I thought that, I could understand each and every conversation that was happening at once. Not only that, I've never taken a foreign language in my life, never got to have the ability to take one. I didn't have a teacher that would teach. But anyway, my point is, not only was it every specific conversation I could understand, but there was different languages and I could understand it. I could understand all of it. And the takeaway from this was there was a recurring theme in all of the conversations, and they were without love. They were all negative. So there was self-loathing. There was, people talking about how much anger and hatred they had for others. People plotting to do horrible things. If you can imagine any kind of conversation where love isn't present, your mind can just go wild. And it was just absolutely terrifying. And as soon as I had that realization that, oh my God, like I'm above all of these people hovering, and this is horrifying. I don't want to be here. There is no love present. And I just came from heaven, which was completely the opposite. I'm trying to make sense of this. And all of a sudden, as I'm trying to make sense of this, I'm crying out to God to help me. And as soon as I cry out, help me, my light from within came on. And just like when he had the rock and he showed me the demonstration and the light was everywhere emanating, that's exactly what my body was. It was giving off this light that, like a lighthouse, you couldn't miss it. In the dark, it's the one light. So as my light's going on, and I know it's coming from me, I see and feel all these hands, human fingers, pulling me. They're trying to pull at me because I'm hovering right above them. And they want the light, and they're trying to pull at me. And each finger I remember feeling had so much power on it that it was literally draining my life force out. And I knew that if I stayed there any longer, I would be completely taken down into them, and I didn't feel like I would be able to get out. I mean, my life force was just quickly, like a battery, just draining. And I just remember crying out to God, please help me, God. I love you. I work for you now. Please don't forget me. I need you. I can't do this without you. And establishing that love connection, which is what I did, that desire to have that love connection from God, in that very moment, all of those hands started reluctantly lifting off of me. And eventually, when the last finger was off of me, my body starts going up high enough so that no one can touch me. And I start going back towards that tunnel, floating still on my back, towards the tunnel. And I remember as I'm going back towards the tunnel and I'm finally getting in there, having conversation again with God because I've got that connection established again. And I just remember thinking to God, I could feel while I was there, even though, the love wasn't present, I couldn't help but feeling that not all of those people were bad. And I could feel that, well, aren't they your children too? Can't you help them? Why won't you help them? I wasn't perfect. I sinned. I should be in there. Whatever that is, I'm sure I should be there, And God said to me again, he reminded me of with the gift of life, hand in hand, he gives free will. And so it was free will that they were choosing not to have that love connection. But here's what I learned. You know how I went in there, and I went in there at that time from being in the dark tunnel to all of a sudden not feeling God, right? That connection. But remember when I cried out, as soon as I cried out and I declared my love and, desire for God, my creator, how that love connection came on, the light came on and was established again. So God explained to me, our love connection, our desire for him, it doesn't expire. It's not like, oh, you got until you're 43, Mr. Jones, to decide if you're going to make that love connection or not. No. God extends that as a gift with free will for us to desire that connection at any point. And it doesn't expire once we leave our human, shell as a spiritual being. And so those people were in there, not because God put them there. They put themselves there when they chose to not have that love connection with God. But they could get out at any time. All they had to do was establish again, like I did, cry out for the desire to have that love connection with God. And they could get out just like I did at any time. So to me, that was one of the most profound things, being terrified of dying until this happened, was coming to the understanding, because I wasn't taught that in organized religion. So that was really hard for me to, come back and for a long time process and telling people and everything, because, I'm not saying, oh, this is the only way it is or whatever. I'm just telling you what I experienced. And what I experienced was not what I was taught. So that was incredible, because for me, it was like this huge weight had been lifted off, knowing that, we aren't judged. God doesn't put those people there. They put themselves there, and they could get out at any time. And I had so much peace, because I really, even though I didn't know those people, there was a strange connection of feeling like I did, and I felt for them. My heart felt sorrow and pity and sadness for them, and I didn't want to give up on them. And I came to understand, well, God's not giving up on them. God never will. And remember, time doesn't exist like we know it there. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So anyway, I finally get back to the tunnel. I'm stood up in the tunnel again, and I finally get back down to earth. It seems like forever, and I'm exhausted. And I get to the point where I'm hovering on the ceiling, looking down at the emergency room, the gurney, and it's my body, my shell, and my husband's crying over my body. And, the nurses and stuff are doing what they need to do to make sure that I'm okay. And at that point, I knew that I was going to have to go back into my body, because in order to do this work for God and complete this mission, I had to be in that vehicle, because it's the only way that I could be on earth. The vehicle is my body. And I just remember having a huge panic moment, going, there's no way. There's absolutely no way that I can go back into that, because, I felt so vast in the spiritual form that I couldn't understand how to fit myself back into it. And I knew that it was going to be painful and confining. And it was like everything the opposite of what I was just experiencing. And so I had this panic moment again of, I can't do it. And I remember it's almost like a magnet was on my back. And you know how there's like curtain partitions in emergency rooms? So I was in one, and then so then there's one next to me. Well, anyway, I could feel like a magnet on the ceiling, and I'm taken over like zoom to the next partition with a gurney on it. And I'm sat down on that gurney, and no one's in that room. And 3 nurses, they were older, and they looked like, I knew they were like in the angel form, but human form, came right up to my face, and they said, shh, be quiet and listen. You will go back into that body. You have everything that you need. God loves you. And the sooner you do this, it's going to be okay. God's with you. But it has to be done. You don't have a choice. And so I just kind of had a little bit of relief. And then I just remember that magnet sucked me back up to the ceiling and then put me over. And then I remember looking down at my body again and going right into it. Didn't have a chance to contemplate whatever, didn't matter. And at that point, yeah, it was really hard, because it was like I was trying to unfold myself in the shell and trying to find space for my spiritual self. And it was like I felt so confined.
Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and
quite often composers declare openly what their music is about. Like for example, preludes of Debussy. Debussy writes a title at the end of each prelude, and for example, when we play something like that, we know exactly what we are supposed to kind of imagine, what kind of image stands up behind this prelude. But sometimes we don't have any title which would inspire us, which would give us a precise idea what this piece is about. And sometimes we can assume things. Like for example, we can assume that Chopin was inspired in a way by poetry of Adam Mickiewicz, and that's why his first ballad sounds in such an epic. This ballad-like epic opening, which immediately sounds like a tale about old events, something ancient and something very medieval in a way. Or for example, we might assume that the character of the E minor violin sonata of Mozart might be connected to the death of his mother, who died the same year. So that's why the character of this piece is so dramatic and restless. But we don't know that for sure, it's just an assumption. But anyway, using extra musical ideas and your imagination, of course, shapes your performance quite a lot. And very much oversimplifying, we can divide people into two major groups. So musicians who would say that, no, you just play what is written in the score, you don't have to bother to imagining stuff, this is all like nonsense, just play what is in the score and that's it, that's good enough. Music is just pure sounds, basically. And another group of musicians say that it's very beneficial actually to use some extra musical associations, something to inspire you, and that it has a positive impact on your interpretation. And I was also formed in that kind of approach, in that kind of school, and that's why I would give you some examples, like how powerful this tool can be actually, and why I think it is very important to let things intertwine. So when you play music, you might be inspired by something else, by some other art forms, art genres, or maybe by some other just extra art experiences, your life experiences maybe. So let's have a look at some examples and see how our imagination can shape and transform our interpretation. So for example, if I play a piece Solfeggiato by C.P. Bach, and I have actually a special video dedicated to that piece, a detailed lesson on that piece. But if I tell myself that, okay, this is a piece which has to sound in a very classical way with a, let's say, pearly touch, and for me it's a piece which should sound like a heavy rain or even a hail, then I easily can come up with something like something like that. Or for example, I would think myself, no, this is actually a Baroque tradition piece, and in Baroque tradition people were using a lot of rubato, and C.P. Bach was a son of a great Johann Sebastian Bach, who was promoting a singing approach, singing way of playing, who was promoting legato a lot, and in general this piece sounds for me rather like a sailing through a sea. So it might be turbulent, it might be stormy, but still it's water, it should have that kind of like wavy sensation. So then we end up with just a different piece, different rendition, and of course there, whatever option you choose, of course there always will be someone who will come and say, no, this is too much rubato, this is too less rubato, and this is I don't know, that or this, who will not agree with you. But the point is that your extra musical idea might actually shape your interpretation quite a lot, and sometimes with some students it's more efficient, more effective to be more on a, let's say, logical, intellectual side. So you say then like, okay, this chord you play on a short whip in motion, focusing your fingers and immediately releasing your hands. And then you free up the hands. Voice the upper voice. Careful with the resolution. And you focus that finger here, you release that finger here, and your elbows should feel like that and stuff. So this kind of approach works best. But for other students, in my experience, it's much more effective to say something like, look, this first chord should sound like a thunder in the sky. And then we have a horrified whisper of an ancient man who sits in the cave. And thinks that those are gods who are angry with him. And appealing to the fantasy of a student sometimes is more effective, because some people who have vibrant imagination and who have already enough, like, let's say, technical resources, they instantly get kind of like triggered, and they come up with a much more vibrant rendition when you appeal to their fantasy. And this is something what my teachers were constantly doing when they were teaching me, and these kinds of associations were very like usual and normal in my course of education. And it's very interesting how even younger children, younger students intuitively, brilliantly feel the music. Once I had a very interesting experience. I had a student who was just